Here are a couple different reasons why your fly fishing guide may never invite you back to fish with them. In other words, don't make these mistakes. I didn't even know about these until later. I have a lot of friends that are guides. I've been around a lot of different fly fishing guides, and I can tell you that these things piss them off every single time. The first thing is not to tip. The going rate for fly fishing guides is 20%. Now, 15% is the lowest that I would go. 25% is like you had a high O time, you caught a ton of fish, and you just want to give that a little bit more generosity to the fly fishing guide. But 20% is a standard. Just stick with 20%, budget that in. If you don't tip the guide, they're not going to invite you back. And don't talk about your fishing trips in other rivers, especially when you're not catching a lot of fish, maybe the first hour of fishing, and you're kind of indicating to the guide that, wow, I fished in New Mexico on the San Juan River and I caught all these fish and my guide was great. We just had the best time. That is not your river at your time of day that you're fishing now. Focus on today. If you're not catching fish, stop talking about fishing stories, about your guides or your experience that you had in the past. Another thing is that fly fishing guides hate when you talk about your experience on the same river you're fishing 25 years ago. 25 years ago is a different ball game. There's different volumes of water. There's water issues. There's more fishing pressure. The fish are suffering. In some parts of the country, the brown trout populations are down. It's just a different scenario. You cannot compare even 5 years ago a river that you fished compared to now. A lot of these rivers are suffering from lack of hatches. The size of fish is diminishing. There's all sorts of problems. So don't compare this river with the same time frame. So don't compare the same river with a different time frame. I know guides don't like that. And it's not that they wouldn't invite you back because of that. Just trust me, don't talk about, oh, I had the best time fishing here, 20 years ago. This is what we did. And on that topic, don't tell the guides what to do. Oh, I want to try this fly or I want to do that. They know what they're doing. Even if you're not catching fish, trust me, the guides know what they're doing. Nobody's going to bring you out there to where you're not going to catch any fish, or they're going to give you a fly that's not going to work. Trust me, nobody wants to do that. They want you to catch fish just as much as you. They're not going to set you up for a non-successful trip. They're going to want you to catch as many fish as frequently as possible. So don't give any indication to them that you're unhappy with the way things are going. Just go with it. You don't have to book without outfitter again, but please don't be condescending about or give any indication that, hey, this guy's a better guide, or this guide service is a little bit better, or this river is better, or hey, 5 years ago, I used to catch fish in here all the time by myself and we're not catching anything. Try to have a good attitude, even if you're not catching a fish. It's not the easiest thing to do, but trust me, guys hate that. And this kind of goes along the same lines. Don't give guides advice. Don't tell the guide what to do. Even if you were a fly fishing guide in, let's say, Missoula, Montana, and you hired a guide on the Bighorn, don't give that guide advice unless they ask for it, which they probably won't. Don't give a guide advice on where to fish, how to fish. Oh, you should talk to my buddy. He's a really good fisherman. It's super condescending. These guides work really hard. It is a hard job, and it is not a job that people really understand. You're working long hours. You're getting up. You're fixing lunches. You're demossing your boat. You're cleaning your boat. A lot goes into it behind the scenes. They're not lazy. They're not in there for you to not catch fish. So please don't give your guide advice. It's not that you won't be invited back, they just hate it. And another thing is trust the guide's experience. If you don't trust their experience and just stick with them, it is really condescending to them and they don't like it. It's a good way to piss a guide off. And then it's not that you're gonna get kicked out or they're not gonna invite you, they may just not like you. And they may not go that extra effort or fish another hour at the end of the day because you're just catching fish on caddis flies, on dry flies, and you're just having a high out time. The guides will go the extra mile for you if you treat them with respect and you treat them respectfully. You tip them 20% no matter whether you catch fish or you don't catch fish. Some days are just bad and it's out of their control. Some days are just gonna be good. Sometimes it takes the third day to actually catch a ton of fish, or if you're after big fish, you have to realize that you're not gonna catch a big fish every single time. If you went fishing and you caught a really big fish with a guide service, you think you could just do that every single time. That's not reality. You're not gonna catch a 22-inch brown trout every single time you go out. Even if somebody told you or promised you at this time of the year at this river it's gonna happen, please don't make that mistake when you're hiring a guide. Another thing guides just generally don't like is complaining. Don't complain about not catching fish or indicate you're grumpy or you're not happy because you're not catching fish. Just practice casting. If you're not catching fish for an hour, it's because the hatch hasn't started. There was a time I was fishing in Montana and I was a little bit disappointed because I wasn't catching any fish. They had talked so highly about this river, but it's because it took the water of that Freestone River to warm up. Once that water warmed up, the fishing was fantastic. And the guide knew that after about 11, maybe 12 o'clock till about 4 o'clock, the fishing was fantastic. It was dry fly fishing. We didn't even use a dropper. It was just dry fly fishing, fishing on the banks, fishing in the middle of the river. Every single hole had a fish that would come up and eat the dry fly. It was absolutely amazing. But the first 2 hours, we barely touched a fish. And the guide knew that later in the day it was going to be a little bit better because the water temperature took a long time to warm up. So it's not necessarily that you're not catching fish because of your guide. It is because there's a lot of different factors, especially in freestone rivers. Another situation I was in, didn't really catch a lot of fish, to be honest with you. And I don't even like talking about this because it has nothing to do with the guide. We fished a river that it was either go big or go home. We're going to go after really, really big fish. And I knew that I may not even catch a fish, maybe catch a couple of fish, but if I did catch a fish, it was going to be a 22 to 25 inch rainbow trout. That's what I was after. And I kind of knew that. The guide was really honest with me in the beginning, but we fished that river. We caught like basically nothing. I caught some whitefish, basically no trout. But the reason I'm not mad about this is because the guide service found out that there were other people that had fished before me. This is a very, very technical river and a river that they hardly bring anybody to because it's either going to be fantastic 10 out of 10 or it's going to be like a 1 or a 0 out of 10. I had the 0 out of 10, but I'm still excited and I still tipped them 20% because that river was fished out before we got there. And some of these rivers cannot handle the pressure, and the more people that are coming to fish these rivers, the less this river is going to fish good. So in other words, we learned that 2 boats went in front of us before we got there. We didn't know that fishing, but we later learned that fact because we learned some of these guys have a big network. They know people. They actually know the name of the person who actually went through there. They know the ranch owner that actually put these guides on that river. And long story short, we found out that it had been fished out. So it wasn't very good fishing. So it has nothing to do with the guide. I wasn't mad at the guide. I still tipped him. I wasn't mad at the outfitter. But I knew going into it that it could be boom or bust. It could be go big or go home. And I went home with very little fish on that day, but I'm totally okay. It was a great experience. I learned a lot about that river and the guide. Fantastic opportunity for me. So it's not always necessarily the guide's fault. So don't blame them and don't talk down to them as if it is their fault all the time. Don't be giving them advice. Oh, I want to try this or try that, or why can't we catch fish like that other guy, or why is that boat catching fish? You'll catch fish, stick with it, trust your guide, and you're gonna be fine. Last piece of advice I have to give after dozens of trips that I've done. Some of these are my friends bringing me out. Some of them I'm on a boat. I'm filming for a film tour because I'm a fly fishing filmmaker. And some of these trips I've paid for. Most of them I just pay. And now I have the money that I can pay my friends to go out. So most of these are paid trips. So I've been on these guided trips all over the world. Iceland, New Mexico, Montana, Oregon, Idaho. I've been on guided trips a lot in my life. I can tell you this is the number one thing. So this is the last tip that I have for this video. The best way to not get invited back to an outfitter or a guide not wanting to take you out again is that you cancel all the time. If you cancel, especially last minute, they're going to take your deposit, but they're still going to be hemorrhaging money because it's hard to fill those spots. A lot of what you don't realize is that a fly shop may have 2 main guides and they hire out guides, maybe 4 or 5 of these guides that come from neighboring towns or cities to come and guide. Now they have 7 guides for the summer. The month of July and August is typically their busiest months of most guide services. But the main guides are going to lose money and the outfitter's just going to hemorrhage money because those guides need to get paid whether you show up or not. If you cancel last minute, you're totally screwing over that outfitter and that guide, and people need to get paid for their time. Imagine if you had a last minute cancellation at your job and you love to fish and you love to get people to fish and somebody cancels last minute. They deserve that money of that cancellation, that deposit that you left, but that doesn't cover all the costs. So if you cancel last minute or reschedule all the time, you have to go with the program. If you're trying to fish the salmon fly hatch and you want the specific time where those bugs are out there and you're just having a heyday, let me tell you, that is a guessing game. You don't know, even the guides don't even know the specific time or date or hour that those bugs are gonna hatch. It's a varying thing. Within a matter of a week or 2, they can narrow it down for you, but you may show up too early or too late, but don't cancel those trips. Try to target another fish, another species, maybe you go to a lake, maybe you go somewhere else. Just tell the guides, hey, the hatch wasn't very good. Can I go to a different river? Those guys work so hard to get even to fish and to get you into a situation where you're going to rebook another trip. They want you to catch a lot of fish, so you rebook, and then they don't have to advertise because they just have returning clients. That is how it works at the guide services and the guide system. So if you reschedule last minute, it is going to tick them off, and you're just going to be on the C list. They're going to have their A customers, their B customers, their C customers. You're going to be on that list, and unfortunately, you're not going to get invited back, especially at those high profile times like July, where they're using some of these outfitter permits to fish. Some of these waters are so heavily pressured that these states are now requiring permits for those guides to use, and they're very valuable. They're actually worth a lot of money. I didn't realize this for a very long time, but they're using those permits on me, and they have a certain amount that they pay for. And if you're burning those up because you wanted to fish on that river that needed a permit, and they have to fill out that permit that morning or that day, and then you cancel, that's a big deal. They're losing money from that and not getting paid for that trip, and they take your deposit, and then maybe you're upset about that. So it's just a bad situation to put anybody in. Don't cancel last minute. It puts people into a bind, and I never realized this till I understood a little bit more about the outfitting business, the guiding business. And if I didn't have a friend in the industry, I would have no idea about this, but I've been doing this long enough that I do understand. It puts them in a huge bind. One time I went to Montana, I was gonna do a guided trip. I had all these friends, they all bailed, and I felt a strong obligation to go and just pay for those trips. And so I ended up going on that trip by myself. Not the most enjoyable thing to travel by yourself, but I was hoping I'd have a group of friends. I ended up doing it by myself. I hired that outfitter and I tipped them generously because I wanted them to see me as a good client. I wanted them to invite me back. I wanted to stay on their A list and not be on their C list like all my other friends that just bailed. So just to give you an example of how important and how strongly I feel about this, hopefully this helps you if you're looking at getting a guided trip. Now I know a little bit more information about what those guides think, what they don't think, what is important to them, and basically how to stay on their good side so that they're going to invite you back. And then you can just text them and you can learn stuff and just kind of become a good client, have a good relationship, because that's what it's about, having a good client guide relationship. And that's going to help the guides, that's going to help you. The expectations are going to be set. You're going to know who you're going with. You can request, I want to go with this guy because I really connected with him, and that sort of thing. So some of these guys, some of the best situations I've ever seen, guys in Montana that like have a small business or work, and they come and they're fishing at a certain time of year that they know is really good, and they know the guide, and they just have that relationship. It's just really easy for everybody. It's good money for the guide service, but those type of people don't cancel last minute, and they don't do anything that will, it's just a respect thing. People don't disrespect the guides or the outfitters. So hopefully this video helps you and you learned a lot. Leave a comment below. If you're a fly fishing guide, let me know what you think of this. Do you agree? Do you disagree with what I'm saying? Do you have anything to add? You know, has this ever happened to you? Have I talked about any specific point that really resonates with you, like the first or the last point that I made, where you're like, I can't stand when people do that? Please leave that in the comments and let other people know, and validate the fact that it's not just me talking. I'm not a guide. I've never been an outfitter. I've never owned a guide service. I've been on a lot of trips, so I'm on that side of it. So somebody could learn from that information. If that is you, guide, outfitter, or somebody who's fished, or if there's a guide who's fished with me before, you obviously know me very well, so you can actually comment, yep, that's exactly what happened here, and I agree with you 100%. So anyways, I'm done with my rambling. Hopefully you learned a lot about this so you can have a much more enjoyable trip, and that guide can benefit from you being a better client. So that's what it's all about. Have a lot of other cool videos for you to check out. Gonna go to some cool destinations this next year. Gonna try to get back to Iceland because we had an awesome time in 2022. So hopefully that video is coming up here in a little bit. Thank you so much for watching, and subscribe to see more of these videos.